The San Francisco Giants are leading the National League West and are getting closer and closer to clinching another division title. Basically, you could say the team of the 2010s, especially with 3 World Series titles, they're back at it in the 2020s. And here to talk with me about the Giants and their successful season, winning 100 games so far and maybe even more, is longtime Giants fan Jon Hernandez. Jon, I really appreciate you being on the show. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be a part of this interview.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's good to be here. It's always fun to talk baseball and especially Giants baseball.
Yeah, I was telling you off air that maybe in Delaware I could find a New York Giants fan if I wanted to talk football, but trying to find a San Francisco Giants fan to talk baseball is the toughest thing in the world.
Yeah, there's not a whole lot of us out here on the East Coast. I mean, I'm in Pittsburgh, and there's not too many of us here either. It's fun to run into somebody around town wearing a Giants hat or something like that, talk to them. But yeah, we're kind of few and far between out here in the East.
And I know before, as we go into the interview, one thing I want to ask you, how did you become a Giants fan? I am assuming living in Pittsburgh, it involves a particular player who used to play for the Pirates and ended up heading a little bit west.
That's true, but I'm not from Pittsburgh. My wife's from here. And actually what happened was I grew up in Wyoming. When I was a kid, my dad told me, he's like, pick teams, stick with them. And exactly like you said, I started collecting baseball cards when I was a kid. I loved Barry Bonds, which is kind of funny. I ended up in Pittsburgh now because I loved him ever since I got his first baseball card when he was on the Pirates. And then when he went to San Francisco, I followed him. I still followed the Pirates a little bit, but I was pretty much all in on Barry Bonds and the Giants. And that was, when I was probably, I think I was 15 when he left Pittsburgh to go to San Francisco. So it was all in from there. And it was rough for a while and until the 2010 season came around, really. But it's been a while. I'd say I've been a Giants fan about 30 years now, and it's going pretty well.
The biggest thing I want to ask you, especially about that, is did you feel like you got flack because it's a particular player that you followed as opposed to some people might be who are like living in St. Louis who used to be Rams fans? They're like, now we don't have anybody to follow anymore or something like that.
Yeah. I think that happens a lot. I think, in my situation, it was more, like I said, I was a fan of the home run hitters back in the 80s and stuff, Canseco, and I love the Bash brothers and, that stuff. And then Bonds, seeing all the steroid talk and all that stuff, seeing everything he could do on a baseball field was just incredible. So following him to a team was not growing up in a place that had any teams. Even when I was a little kid, the Rockies weren't even around until, the early 90s. So I literally didn't have a team anywhere near where I was growing up. And it was interesting to find a team and stick with them. I kind of just went from, I had a bunch of friends that, this was our Little League baseball team name, so that's the team I like, and they've stuck with them, things like that. And I was more like, I like Barry Bonds and follow him wherever he went.
I know you have a lot of choice, especially in the past 10 years. Most memorable moment as a San Francisco Giants fan?
Man, when they won the World Series in 2010, Brian Wilson finishing out that game was incredible after waiting all this time it's kind of rough. Like I said, growing up in Wyoming, I didn't have any teams really. And so the teams I picked was the Utah Jazz, which were closer, it's been rough being fans of the Jazz, especially with Michael Jordan around, of course. And then probably the biggest mistake I made was picking the Atlanta Falcons. That was my football team. And we all know how that's gone for, forever. So it was rough for a while, being a fan of those three teams. I didn't have any championships at all until, 2010 came around. And that's probably my number one memory as being a Giants fan, but a very, very close second and probably right up there was Giants playing the Pirates here in Pittsburgh in the wild card in 2014. And Bumgarner just shutting the Pirates down, Crawford hitting that grand slam, around all these Pittsburgh people here, watching the game with a bunch of Pittsburgh fans and stuff and rubbing it into them. That was really high up on my Giants memories for sure. But like you said, there's these last 12 years, there's been a lot. I mean, Ishikawa sending them to the World Series in 2014 and, Romo striking out Cabrera for the World Series in 2012. There was a lot of stuff, a lot of good stuff.
Which championship do you put over the other? I know, like you said, they're tough, especially when you have 3 championships in a 6-year span.
Yeah, the 2010 was the most special, I think, just like as a Giant. And we'd been waiting, so long. But that 2014 run with Bumgarner, as someone who loves baseball and not just the Giants, I mean, I love baseball. I love watching historical things, like look at the stuff this year with Ohtani and some of the stuff that's happening. Bumgarner's, playoff and World Series run in 2014 I think was just insane. I don't know if we'll ever see anything like that again. So the 2010 one I think was awesome because it was the first one, in San Francisco. But that Bumgarner run in 2014, that was incredible. It was just amazing.
Going into the season, what were the expectations? I know Gabe Kapler, another year back, everybody thought, well, in Philadelphia, it didn't work out. Why would it work in San Francisco? But heading into this season, did you think they would have a roster assembled for 100 wins starting in spring training, or was this something that just sort of came out of nowhere?
No, absolutely not. And I'll tell you this right now: anyone who said they saw the Giants where they're at now is lying. Because there's no one. I mean, even probably the most diehard Giants fans were maybe hoping for a 500 season. It's always strange going from someone like Bochy to Kapler, and if you've been a manager for so long, and Kapler in Philly, it didn't work that great, but I wasn't super excited when they hired him just because you didn't really know what to expect. But it seems like his attitude with these guys, and I think him having Posey and Crawford and Belt and a lot of these veterans on there that played against him and things like that, I think that's created a level of respect. And, a lot of these young guys that nobody expected to do what they're doing. I was hoping for maybe a 500 season. I was hoping, maybe they can surprise some people. I had no idea it would turn out like it has. I mean, I'm pretty sure I was like everybody else with the Dodgers and Padres and maybe the Diamondbacks. And then, the Giants might be ahead of the Rockies was what I was hoping for. But, the Padres, we see they're just paper champions, and the Dodgers are good, like every year, trying to buy another championship. But Giants, I think, surprised everybody.
To you, what was it do you think has been the secret sauce? You mentioned Kapler and having the respect of the veterans, but to you, it doesn't seem like they've done well. I know Mike Yastrzemski had a breakout season last year, and he's been, while his average has been low, I mean, he's still putting out the power supply. But to you, what is it that has been such a big factor in their success?
Yeah, I've been really surprised and super impressed and happy with their pitching. Gossman, I think it was kind of like, okay, this guy could be good. And, especially the first half of the season, he was pitching so amazing. Him and DeGrom were right. And the fact that you're in the same sentence as DeGrom when nobody's even heard of Gossman, before this year was impressive. But yeah, I think the pitching has been great. The bullpen's a little shaky at times. I remember a couple of weeks ago, I saw that they'd blown something like 18 or 19 games, that they could be 6 or 7 games up on the Dodgers at this point. But bullpen's a little shaky. But I really think, the power's been there. The Giants just set their single season record for home runs as a franchise, which I don't think a lot of people saw that coming. But you look at a lot of these guys that it just seems like they've meshed so well together. Like Lamont Wade has been playing incredible, getting La Stella, before the season started. And I think it's a lot of these young guys mixed in with these older veterans. And you look at Posey took last year off because of COVID. He came back and it looked like he got a lot of his energy back and he's played great. Crawford is, nobody talks about him in the MVP race. I definitely think he belongs there. Belt has a career high in home runs. A lot of these guys have just done things that nobody thought they would do towards the end of their careers. And I think a lot of the younger guys seeing that too. Their defense has been great. It just seems like they're feeding off each other and it's pretty fun to watch. It's just been, a lot of these games where they're getting down 2-3 runs and all of a sudden they start coming back and you see the excitement that hasn't been there for, 4 or 5 years now. So I think it's just been a really good meshing together of the veterans, the young guys, of the pitching. And, I think Kapler's made a lot of good moves during this year.
Is there a particular moment during the season where you think, yep, these guys are going to the playoffs?
Yeah, it's funny because even for the last month and a half, I tell people all the time, like, I'm super pumped and I'm super happy what's going on, but I'm just kind of waiting for the run to end. I just kind of had this feeling like it's just almost too good to be true. But, it was a couple weeks ago when they played the Dodgers, every game was close. They ended up winning that series. And that right there was, they were right there on the wild card anyway. I was like, they're going to make the playoffs and hopefully it's not a wild card, but, the division be better, but the wild card will work too. But yeah, it was probably, honestly, I'm not going to say that I figured this in July that they were going to make the playoffs. It's been, for me anyway, it's kind of been like, loving the ride, but being cautiously optimistic about it just because it kind of seems like it could have ended at any time and it's still going. So I'm hoping that it can go through October and we'll see what happens there.
Was there a time you were worried about them making the playoffs? Was there a stretch that made you sort of worried? It's like, okay, will the Dodgers or the Padres overtake us?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say I thought that, everybody knows the Dodgers, they won the division, I don't know, 8 or 9 years in a row. So it was kind of like, well, we're just waiting for the Dodgers to hit their run. Then they traded for Scherzer and Trey Turner. It's like, oh man, like, they're going all in again. And right then I was kind of like, well, hopefully the Giants make the playoffs, but after these moves, it kind of looks like the Dodgers, might take them for the division. I've never really thought that, like I said, I was cautiously optimistic they'd make the playoffs to begin with. So I wasn't really thinking like maybe they won't make the playoffs. It was just kind of like, I'm just going to ride this. And right now they're in the wild card. Right now they're in the division lead. The last couple of months has been kind of just riding this wave of they don't get on these big losing streaks. I mean, I think in the last month or two that I think they lost 4 in a row one time, like the Braves series and then Dodgers game. And you kind of think, well, I don't know, this is getting a little bit dicey here. And then they just come back and win, 3-4 series after that. So I think they've just been such a nice surprise for me anyway, to see, times where it looks like they're about to fall behind and all of a sudden they just bounce back and go and win a few series in a row and look really strong again.
Going into the playoffs, who do you feel the Giants match up the best with in the National League?
I personally think that the best matchup for the Giants would be the Brewers. And that's almost because I don't want to see them play the Cardinals, who are just ridiculous out of their minds right now. And that's a very scary team that's just, they're good every year. And they're just, I mean, this run they're on right now is just crazy good. The Dodgers, as much as I'd love to see the Dodgers-Giants playoff series, that worries me a little bit too. I think the Giants could hold their own, but the Dodgers are a tough team. I think the Brewers are good too, but I think the Giants probably match up best with them. And we'll see what happens if those two match up in the playoffs. But I think as it's looking right now, if the Giants do hold on to the West and the best record, I mean, you're looking at Dodgers or Cardinals probably, and that's going to be a tough first round for sure.
What is it about the Cardinals, I guess, is scary? Is it just the fact that they're peaking at the right time? Yeah. Or is it that all of a sudden it is the 2014 Royals? As an Orioles fan, I'm thinking, well, we won the East. We got past Detroit, where we thought were going to be the scariest team with the 3 Cy Young Award winners. And then next thing you know, we run into the spunky little Royals team that swept them in 4 games.
Yeah. Man, the Cardinals, it's just one of those teams that, like, every year going in, when I talk with all my baseball friends and stuff, it's like, the Cardinals, it doesn't seem like they have any like big superstars anymore, like these guys that scare everyone. But man, they're just something about that front office and bringing in the right guys and the right players. And I think watching some of these games, and I think they have the pitching. They're very similar to the Giants in the fact that they got these veterans like Wainwright and Molina. And, Goldschmidt and Arenado are obviously studs too, but they're also these veterans that are kind of, bringing on these young guys that to kind of bringing them along with them. You look at like this O'Neill kid. I mean, it's ridiculous some of the stuff they're doing, and, they hit their stride at the right time and they're extremely well managed. I think their hitting coach and stuff is incredible. So I think they also have the benefit of being in not such a super tough division, but I think they really peaked at the right time. They're just, this reminds me a lot of, a few years ago when, the Rockies went on that ridiculous run. I mean, they lost to the Red Sox in the World Series. It was 04, 05, something like that. But, to win all those games at the end of the year and kind of almost sweep their way through the playoffs to the World Series. Kind of looks like the Cardinals are on that kind of same run. And it's impressive to watch, but it's a little bit scary as an opposing fan of a team.
To you, the injury with Evan Longoria early on, how devastating was that? And how beneficial was getting Chris Bryant from the Cubs and filling that hole?
Yeah, that's huge. I think like everybody else, I was a little bit surprised that the Cubs just kind of traded away their entire roster almost and just like kind of gave up when they did. I was actually out on vacation in Utah with my family when the trade deadline was about to go down. And I remember Baez got traded to the Mets and they were talking about Bryant. And I was like, man, that'd be pretty awesome if he came to San Francisco. And sure enough, that worked out. And I was really pumped. And, Longoria, that dude's been a stud for a long time. And, in Tampa, he was really good. He's been, I think, a huge veteran leadership guy, and just, he still has some pop in that bat. He's still a pretty good defensive third baseman for his age and stuff. But having Bryant is just so huge. Having a guy who won the MVP, 4 or 5 years ago, his age, and still, being able to stick him at third base, being able to throw him in the outfield, and, bring him in as a pinch hitter that is hitting home runs and has a huge bat like he does. I think that's been huge. And the fact that he grew up a Giants fan also is a big deal. It always seems like these guys that go to teams they rooted for as kids, Brandon Crawford being a Giants fan his whole life and, playing for this franchise. And you see the different kind of excitement that they have for a team they grew up rooting for and stuff like that. But yeah, I think, when Longoria went out, that sucked. And it's like, hopefully that doesn't stay. But I think picking up Chris Bryant has been huge, and the GM and the front office has done a great job, I think, of putting players around him. And if something like that does happen with an injury, having somebody ready to step up and having these guys perform at a high level, which has been great to watch.
Going to the World Series prediction, who do you have coming out of the American League? Who do you have coming out of the National League? Who wins the World Series, and in how many games?
I think the Rays are the team to beat the American League. I kind of was all in on them last year. I think it'd be interesting to see what would have happened had they not pulled, Blake Snell in that game. I think they have a really, really good young team that is just playing really good. And some of those guys in there, Rosarena and some of these dudes are really, really good. And I think they kind of fly under the radar. Everybody talks about, Yankees, Red Sox. I'm sure being an Orioles fan, you're sick of all that Yankees and Red Sox stuff. But I think the Rays kind of flew under the radar of having, a really good team. So I think the Rays are going to come out of the American League. I think the Giants are going to go to the World Series this year. Call me a homer. They've been doing the right things all year. I think they have a lot of playoff experience. You look at these guys that have won, World Series, and then Bryant coming over that's won a World Series, and some of these guys. I think they're going to go to the World Series too. And I'm just going to call it now. I'm going to say it's going to be a 6-game Giants win World Series. We started off with the even years in 2010, 12 and 14. I think we're going to go with the odd years this year of 21, 23, 25, 27, 29. So book it.
Well, Jon, as we wrap this up, and I really do appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule, what are ways people can reach out to you on social media to talk Giants baseball? And do you have anything you want to promote, anything you want to give a shout as well?
I want to say thanks to David for recommending me to you. He's a good dude. And thank you for having me on here. I'm in a couple of different baseball groups on Facebook. Nothing I'm like super, super involved in, but I am on Facebook, Instagram, just Jon Hernandez. You can look me up on there if there's anything you want to talk about or whatever. But I'm in a bunch of different Giants groups on Facebook and things like that. But yeah, I don't have a whole lot of things to promote. Like I said, shout out to David. Shout out to you for having me on here. This is cool. Shout out to Baltimore, actually. My brother just moved to Baltimore. He lived in Cockeysville. And been there to Baltimore a few times, and I love going to Orioles games and checking out the city there and stuff. And so I thought it was cool when David told me that you were on here, and seeing some of your Facebook stuff of you at the Orioles games and things like that. It's pretty cool. So shout out to you, and trust me, man, as an Orioles fan, I got a lot of respect for you sticking around with a rough team like that. I mean, I live in Pittsburgh, and it's rough for the baseball fans here too, for the Pirate fans. But thanks for having me on. It's cool. This is a cool thing.